Okay, so I am doing this video, a quick look at all-time channel viewership from the UK, in response to a comment posted on the last channel viewership video that I did about a week or so ago, and it was very interesting. A viewer, a long-time subscriber and viewer, basically posed the question, how does the UK break down as percentage of overall viewers? That's the best way to describe the question. And it's very interesting because when I go on my YouTube studio and it gives you the list of all-time viewership and percentages, the UK as a whole comes out at 43.5%. Now, the UK is one of those nations that when you click on its name, because there's only a handful of nations that actually break down as separate states, territories and provinces, the UK obviously breaks down to the four home nations. So that's Northern Ireland, Wales, Scotland and England. I'm doing them in the reverse order. You notice that? That's how they line up in reverse order of percentage of overall views. The other countries that you can break down into the various states, territories and provinces are Canada, the US and Germany for analytical purposes. And I'll do the US in time and I'll do Germany in time because there's enough viewers from those countries and Canada to actually give you a decent breakdown on where people are viewing from in those locations and the percentage of viewers. And the US is very, very interesting. Very interesting. I have more viewers on the west coast of the US than the east coast of the US, and I find that very, very interesting because of the time zones and whatnot. Now, the UK as a whole comes out at 43.5% all time, because in the last week, obviously more people have viewed the content on the channel, and there's been a lot more viewers from Australia that have driven some growth. Now, when I click on the UK and the breakdown of the four home nations, you combine their percentages together, they come out at 42.3%. That is 1.2% lower than the overall total. And here I think is why. Potentially, and I'm putting out here is potentially, the overall total number of views potentially includes the Isle of Man and the Channel Islands. Now these little nations, and they are little nations, they're semi-independent in a sense, are classed as Crown Dependancies. They do come under the UK, but they don't in certain areas of foreign affairs and international organisations. So, for example, the Isle of Man and the Channel Islands were never part of the EU, and technically have their own trade arrangements and tax laws and tax rates that are different from the UK. But because of foreign relations and defence, we're responsible for them. So that's basically what a Crown Dependency is. So they're sort of semi-independent, semi-colonies in a way. So it's a weird relationship. It's very hard. I'm going to have to do a video on Crown Dependencies on the other channel. And that's where I believe potentially that extra 1.2% of viewers comes from for the UK as a whole, because I can't find any information in the top 50 nations all time of the Isle of Man and the Channel Islands. So that's kind of interesting. So I believe potentially they're lumped into the UK as an overall, but when we break down the UK and click on it, it gives me the four home nations, and that's, I believe, where that potential variance is. It's just an interesting little quirk. Now, with that in mind, and clearing up that little vagueness of data collection, because there's always a variable, let's break down where overall percentage, so this is not just the UK's percentage of 100%, okay, X amount of people from England, Scotland, Wales, overall, this goes against overall views, coming in at fourth place, overall. So if Northern Ireland was just a separate country and was a separate standalone entity, Northern Ireland overall, even though it is obviously a country, but it makes up the UK, comes in at 0.2% of viewers all time on the channel are from Northern Ireland. But if you were to do month-by-month snapshots, some months Northern Ireland comes in at second at all time in the UK. Last year, for example, during the Six Nations, Ireland regularly came in at second behind England when it came to the UK with a good number of views. So it does vary on the content. It's very noticeable. And last year when I did my GAA content, again, Northern Ireland came in quite strongly in comparison, roughly around that period when I was posting my GAA content in regards to the other home nations. Sometimes it was actually ahead of England on certain days. But overall, in the lifetime of the channel, since 2017, comes in at fourth place. And overall, really low down the list. I mean, it wouldn't make the top 10 by a long stretch. I don't think it even would make the top 50 at 0.2%. Above Northern Ireland is Wales at 1% of total all-time views. Again, this is very interesting. It's going by population. Northern Ireland has the least population. Obviously, England has the most population out of the UK. Wales sits at third below Scotland when it comes to total overall population in the UK. Wales comes in at 1%. Now, I'm a little surprised considering the major football clubs in Wales, especially Wrexham, Newport, Cardiff and Swansea, play in the English league system, and I've done a lot of videos on the English, so the English Football League, the FA Cup, obviously with a lot of match reviews, and I believe I've done a match review of every single Welsh club at some point. I've watched them on the TV, done a match review in regards to the FA Cup. I've done all the club histories for the most part of the top Welsh clubs. I think there's a few more clubs that play in the English league system I haven't done a club history on yet, but I've covered the big four. So I am surprised that they're not a higher percentage. I'm not surprised they sit below Scotland simply because of the population size, but I am surprised with the percentages of three of the four home nations being as low as they are. Scotland comes in at 2.5%. Now, yes, I've done more club history videos of Scottish football clubs. Obviously, the Rugby and the Six Nations is on. Yes, obviously, rugby union fans across Europe will watch. And the viewership figures when I do, rugby union content, regardless of where people are watching around the world, is generally pretty good. But I am surprised again with the massive difference in views between Wales and Scotland. 1.5% doesn't sound like a lot, but when you look at it against England, it's huge. So between three out of the four home nations, we're looking at 2.7% of total views all time, if you exclude England from the UK, come from Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland. So 2.5% come from Scotland. Massive jump of 38.6% are from England. Now, I'm not surprised with England being the top nation in the four home nations in regards to viewership, but I am surprised with the massive gap between England, top, and the other three with very small percentages. Now, yes, I know the population of England is much higher. Now, it's interesting because when you go on your analytics, it doesn't tell you what country people are subscribing from. And that's what's really interesting. Now, I know I've got a lot of subscribers from the northeast of England, London and the West Midlands. I know that for a fact. I know I've got a lot of subscribers from Staffordshire, Worcestershire, and the West Midlands and Warwickshire. Simply by the cities they're watching from, always the same towns and cities keep popping up, and I know who they are in the comments section, and they tell me the football club. So I know that for a fact. I also know I've got a lot of subscribers from the northeast of England, from the Newcastle and Sunderland area. Again, it's kind of obvious you're dealing with a Geordie or a Mackham or a Smoggy, for example, or a Monkey Hanger from Hartlepool, because they're normally very proud of the football club they support, because they will mention that they're a Hartlepool fan or a Sunderland fan or a Newcastle fan or a Middlesbrough fan. But also some of the wording they use in the comment section. You get to know regional slang and regional spellings of words as well. So I know I've got viewers from Edinburgh and Glasgow, and I believe I've got some subscribers from Perth and Aberdeen. It's very, very nice. But if you're an Aberdeen fan or a St Johnstone fan, you're not going to be from Glasgow. It's very, very obvious, especially in Scotland. It's a very tribal nature of their supporter bases of their clubs. So there we go. That's a breakdown of the UK into the four home nations. It would be nice to see the amount of viewers from the Isle of Man and the Channel Islands. It would be nice to see. Maybe if I did a video on the Isle of Man TT and Matt Le Tissier and Graham Massey, for example. Matt Le Tissier and Graham Massey are from the Channel Islands, great football players in their time, in the 90s, into the 2000s as professional players. Both play for Southampton, ironically. And the Isle of Man TT is probably the most bonkers, absolutely bonkers motor race in the world, or motor race meet, because there's multiple races on the Isle of Man as the Isle of Man Week, the Tourist Trophy. I mean, you've got to have balls of lead to do that. Steel, no, lead's a bit more poisonous. You've really got to be completely bananas to ride a 1000cc superbike around the mountains of the Isle of Man at 150 to 200 mile an hour, full throttle on public roads. You've got to be a bit mental. Peter Hickman, I believe, has the highest average speed around the Isle of Man. I've got to do a video on fun Isle of Man TT facts. But there we go. So that's a quick look at the channel viewership all time from the UK, how it breaks down. Are you surprised with some of the overall percentages? Are you surprised with the fact the four home nations in order from England at the top to Northern Ireland at the bottom actually go in population order? And yes, I am fully aware that in Northern Ireland there are some social issues between certain communities and certain cities in regards to in certain locations it's more of a GAA kind of thing for political and social reasons, and in other neighbourhoods even in the same city, it's more of a we'll watch rugby union and football instead of the GAA. And in some neighbourhoods, you're happy watching both. So, because of the content that I do, and yes, I have done some Gaelic Athletic Association content, it's going to reflect in viewership. Um, but overall, I'm not surprised with the order they come in, but I'm surprised with some of the percentages. And then, of course, that variance between breaking the UK down to the 4 home nations versus the total overall. Yes, the Isle of Man and Channel Islands, I do believe, is included in the UK as a whole, and that may be that 1.2% that is missing. So there we go. But from me, for now, thank you very much for watching. Place where you are in the UK below if you are a UK viewer, and do you want me to do other nations like Germany, Canada, and the US and how they break down with viewership and where people are from? Because that's the other nations on the YouTube studio that you can break down into states and territories that I'm aware of, where you can look at where viewers are from. It'd be very, very interesting. But from me for now, thank you very much for watching, and I'll have some more content for you very, very soon.